The two homosexual celebrities Troy Donahue dated behind their backs were named by him. On January 27, 1936, Merl Johnson Jr. was born in New York City. Another name for him is Troy Donahue. He was raised in an affluent household. His mother was an actress and his father led a company. Donahue had a passion for the performing arts from an early age. He studied writing at Columbia University before moving west to follow the lure of Hollywood. When Donahue was signed by Warner Brothers in the late 1950s, it was his big break. They gave him the stage name Troy Donahue, which would soon appear on teen magazine covers and movie theater marquees across the nation. His breakthrough performance was in the 1959 film A Summer Place, a melodramatic tale of young love and intergenerational strife starring Sandra Dee. Due to her dreamy, gentle role as the sensitive love lead, Donahue became an immediate heartthrob in the highly successful film. Young people found it appealing that his character's bond with Dee's character was depicted against a backdrop of emotional upheaval and parental disapproval. The theme song gained as much popularity as Donahue. The fame of Donahue continued to grow in the early 1960s. He starred in several popular films, including Palm Springs Weekend, 1963, Rome Adventure, 1962, Susan Slade, 1961, and Parish, 1961. He frequently portrayed the gentle, kind, and occasionally troubled but always desired love lead in these films. During the Kennedy administration, his on-screen persona was a perfect representation of the ideal young man in America prior to Vietnam. Donahue received more fan mail than nearly every other Warner Brothers actor at the height of his career. His position in popular culture was further cemented by his frequent appearances in fan magazines such as Teen Beat and Photoplay. However, maintaining the fame became more difficult as the culture shifted in the late 1960s with the emergence of gritty and socially conscious films. Donahue's reputation for cleanliness and neatness began to wane. In contrast to Donahue's typical on-screen persona, Hollywood started to favor a new kind of anti-hero and more complex, unhappy characters. He lost notoriety and fewer people were making offers. He had a difficult time redefining himself both professionally and emotionally during a period of significant change in the entertainment industry. Because of his personal issues and the pressures of fame, he lost both his job and his health. Behind the glamour, Donahue's personal life was beset by serious issues. He battled alcoholism and financial difficulties for the majority of the 1970s and 1980s. He occasionally lived in his car and was homeless, which served as a sobering reminder of how swiftly notoriety can fade. But throughout, he was forthright about his issues. He eventually sobered up and changed his ways. Donahue felt calm and as though he had a new purpose in life after he began attending Alcoholics Anonymous. His honesty about his story was admired and respected by those who once looked up to him as a teenage heartthrob and now view him as a survivor. Donahue's career took a slight improvement in his later years. John Waters' 1990 satirical homage to the 1950s, Crybaby, featured him in a humorous cameo. He also had guest appearances on television shows such as The Love Boat and Chips. During these visits, Donahue was able to confront his past with dignity and humor. In addition, he was a well-known guest at nostalgia conventions, where he interacted with fans of all ages and heard numerous accounts of how his films had impacted their lives. He was more than just a matinee idol because of his enduring charm, self-deprecating wit, and humility in the face of adversity. Troy Donahue was one of the most well-known matinee heroes in the late 1950s and early 1960s. His life was equally as complicated off-screen as it was on. Donahue was well known for his attractive appearance and evocative parts in romantic comedies. He had 4 marriages and several significant relationships in his personal life, each of which revealed a different aspect of his difficult journey through addiction, recovery, reinvention, and stardom. He married actress Suzanne Pleshette, who rose to fame on television, particularly on The Bob Newhart Show, in his first and most well-known marriage. On the set of the 1964 film Rome Adventure, the two rising stars first crossed paths. Together, they got along well both on and off the set. Their brief marriage in January 1964 marked the end of their fast-paced relationship. They divorced in 9 months, claiming they could no longer get along. Despite their brief marriage, Donahue's relationship attracted a lot of media attention at the time and continues to be one of the most talked about aspects of her personal life. Many believe that the relationship ended because of Donahue's mounting personal issues and the pressures of trying to succeed in Hollywood. Prior to his marriage to Plachette, Donahue was in a relationship with Swedish-American model and actor Lily Cardell. When Cardell sued Donahue, claiming he had physically abused her during their engagement, she ended their relationship in a public scandal. She filed a lawsuit against him for damages, which made headlines and damaged Donahue's polished image, which studios had laboriously cultivated. The episode generated rumors about Donahue's increasing instability and issues with alcohol and anger that would follow him for years, despite the fact that no one was charged with a crime. On October 21, 1966, Donahue made his second attempt at marriage by wedlock to actress Valerie Allen, who had starred in numerous TV shows and motion pictures during the 1960s. Donahue's marriage initially appeared to be a new beginning. He was working to get both his personal and professional lives back on track. But behind closed doors, things rapidly deteriorated. Allen filed for divorce from his wife in 1968, just 2 years after they were married, claiming that she was being cruel. Although the divorce proceedings were not made public, they revealed a tense home life, which might have been exacerbated by Donahue's continued battles with addiction and misbehavior during this period. Alma Sharp, an executive secretary who wasn't in show business, was the subject of his third marriage. They married on November 15, 1969. Donahue was already removing himself from the limelight at that point. His notoriety had already diminished by the early 1970s. Donahue reportedly needed a sense of stability and normalcy as his personal issues worsened and his fame waned, and Sharp provided it. Despite being grounded and relatively private, their relationship was unable to withstand the strains they were experiencing. They were married for 3 years before divorcing in 1972. According to the couple's friends, Donahue's persistent drug use and difficulties adjusting to life away from the spotlight in Hollywood likely contributed significantly to their breakup. Donahue's fourth and final wife was Vicki Taylor. They were wed between 1979 and 1981. By this time, Donahue was a bit of a recluse who only occasionally appeared in TV series and films. Although not much is known about Taylor or their relationship, it is widely known that their marriage, like all of his others, was characterized by emotional distance and instability. Their marriage was brief. 2 years later, they called it quits. Donahue's personal life was characterized by mental instability and a history of failed marriages. Many believe that as Donahue grew older, his relationship with Jen Chow, a Chinese-American mezzo-soprano opera singer renowned for her rich voice and commanding stage presence, became more loving and stable. This came after decades of battling financial difficulties, alcoholism, and diminishing celebrity. Even though they weren't legally married, Donahue believed that the relationship was crucial. According to those who knew Donahue well, Chow gave his final chapter a sense of friendship, love, and tranquility. Compared to the tumultuous relationships he had previously experienced, theirs appeared to be different. They supported him as his health deteriorated and he continued to cope with the psychological fallout from a traumatic past. Shaw was the name of Donahue's son as well. In 1969, he briefly dated a woman with whom he had this child. Donahue had been unaware of Shaw's existence for a long time. Later in life, when Shaw was an adult, Donahue met his son and learnt that he was Shaw's father. The actor reportedly felt extremely depressed after the meeting. For a long time, he had been feeling bad about a lot of things in his personal life. Even though it was too late, connecting with Shaw gave him a sense of heritage and an opportunity to atone for all the mistakes and lost opportunities he had made throughout his life. Troy Donahue, a former movie star from the 1950s and 1960s with golden hair, began to discuss very personal aspects of his past that he had kept hidden during his prime in the final years of his life. Donahue's private life was far more complex and dualistic than anyone realized until much later, despite the fact that he was always associated with the nice, straightforward romantic parts that teen idols of the era were known for. Among his most startling remarks was that he had been seeing a number of gay celebrities in the old Hollywood scene, but they kept their relationships a secret due to the stifling atmosphere at the time and the fear of losing their jobs if they were discovered. Donahue openly acknowledged that he had dated men in his youth, some of whom were well-known actors with sizable fan bases, in a few discreet interviews during the 1990s, when Hollywood began to confront its history of stigmatizing LGBTQ+ individuals. It was 1950. The quote attributed to him is, "You could lose everything. Studios controlled your appearance. They would kill you if they learnt." According to reports, Donahue spoke respectfully and sorrowfully about Anthony Perkins. Best known for his role as Norman Bates in Psycho, Perkins is a mysterious celebrity. His relationship with Perkins was emotional and secretive, as Donahue described it. They met at a party in the late 1950s, when they were both Hollywood rising stars. While Perkins was already receiving recognition for his dark and sensitive roles, Warner Brothers was attempting to turn Donahue into a matinee hero due to his attractive beach blonde appearance. Although they clicked immediately, they were both acutely conscious of the constraints placed on them by their public personas and business contracts. "No one would ever see us together. We had to act for the fake." According to reports, Donahue said, "Always pretend." He knew what it was like to be a mask wearer. Donahue also alluded to a complex dance with Rock Hudson, the square-jawed idol who at the time was the very embodiment of rugged heterosexual masculinity on screen. "We'd meet at the homes of trusted friends or drive out to the coast late at night and just sit in the car talking or listening to the waves. There was a gentleness to him." Donahue mentioned moments when he and Hudson were extremely tense and understood one another, but he never explicitly stated that they were in a long-term relationship. Donahue continued, "Rock had it worse than most of us. He was huge. If he made a mistake, the whole house of cards would fall. But there were times, brief and quiet, when we shared something that no one else could see. We were men who were supposed to embody all of America's aspirations, and we were terrified that we would lose everything." Donahue's later life was characterized by struggle, reflection, and recovery. These claims were not meant to shock people, but rather as an attempt to revive a part of himself that had been buried for decades. We were given a unique and poignant glimpse into the private lives of Hollywood's outstars, men who had to hide their true selves in order to maintain the image that the public and studios desired. Donahue's stories not only highlight the importance of connecting with others, but they also criticize a system that penalized being weak and different. By naming individuals like Anthony Perkins and Rock Hudson, who both struggled with their identities, Donahue was not betraying trust, but rather honoring the truth of a generation that had been denied freedom. Through his statements, we can draw a connection between the glitz and glam of Hollywood's golden age and the culture of silence that has persisted for too long. On August 30, 2001, Troy Donahue, once Hollywood's golden boy of the 1950s and 1960s, suffered a severe heart attack that would ultimately lead to his death. Despite his well-known drug problems, Donahue had been living quietly and sober for a few years at this point, having dedicated himself to healing and a more contemplative way of life. Despite his health deteriorating over the past few months, he was at his flat in Santa Monica, California, a place on the coast where he had lived for a long time. After suffering a heart attack, Donahue was taken to St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, a renowned hospital that has treated many well-known. A team of heart specialists began examining him as soon as he was admitted, and due to the severity of his condition, an emergency angioplasty, a procedure that opens blocked arteries to restore normal blood flow to the heart, had to be performed. At first, the surgery was deemed successful, and his doctors were cautiously optimistic. When his family and friends were informed, many of them believed he had survived the worst, but a terrible second heart attack occurred just hours after the angioplasty. After the second heart attack, his condition deteriorated significantly, prompting doctors to perform coronary artery bypass surgery, a more involved and invasive procedure designed to restore normal blood flow around blocked arteries. 2 days after the heart attack, on September 1, the surgery was performed. Donahue's body was already too weak to recover from the stress of the 2 heart attacks and the ensuing surgery, despite the diligent efforts of the talented surgeons. Troy Donahue was 65 years old when he passed away on September 2, 2001, with his loved ones present at the hospital. A difficult but fascinating journey filled with fame, addiction, starting over, and spiritual exploration came to an end with his death. He was one of Hollywood's most attractive and financially secure leading men in his early career, and even though his fame had waned since then, He was still regarded as a cultural icon from a bygone era. Fans and colleagues' outpouring of condolences demonstrated how much the blonde-haired, blue-eyed actor who once portrayed the ideal young romantic idealist on screen was still adored.